Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Weckerly, and welcome to the Ready Living Podcast, where each episode is designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to create the life you want. Thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe for free on your favorite platform. My guest today is Catherine Bass. She is an enrolled agent, a federally licensed tax professional, and the owner of Bass Tax Service and Bass Tax Relief in Arlington, Texas. With over 25 years in tax preparation and tax resolution, she's helped thousands of individuals and small business owners make sense of complex tax issues and handle stressful IRS situations with confidence. After losing her husband, she experienced firsthand how grief can negatively impact important decision-making. Today, she speaks with widows about the financial fog that often comes after loss and the simple, steady steps they can take to create financial stability and peace. She's a contributing author to the best-selling book Unbreakable Spirit and the chapter From Tears to Treasure, in which she shares her raw, hopeful story of grief, resilience, and learning how to find a financial way forward without shame, panic, or overwhelm. When she's not untangling IRS issues, she enjoys reading, hiking, concerts because, she says, healing doesn't mean you're a robot. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here, and I want to start out with taking us to 2019. Your life changed in the space of a single day. You lost your husband in an accident, leaving you with two children, 12 and 15 years old at the time, I believe. How did you decide what to prioritize in those early days, both for yourself and your kids?
You're sitting there in a state of shock and you just don't even know where to start. You're trying to be strong for your children because obviously they're upset as well. And that was where I prioritized. I got to take care of my kids. I got to make them okay. That's where I started. For me, I was trying really hard not to just have a breakdown. I was afraid if I did, that I wouldn't get up again and then I wouldn't be able to function for my kids. And that was my biggest fear.
Before your husband died, you had already experienced a devastating loss when you were 13 years old, the deaths in a house fire of your three young nephews. Your mother's message to you at the time was essentially, get over it, life goes on. How did that early unprocessed grief impact the way you initially approached grief when your husband passed away?
It was like, you don't have time to grieve. You just got to go through the motions of taking care of your children, keeping your house paid for, keeping a roof over your head. You prioritize the best you can, but it's really hard in that fog. When I was grieving for my nephews, my mother was just like, no, you don't have time for that. We have to live. So when I shoved that away, that's exactly what I did with my husband. And that's why it took me 5 years to finally wake up and say, hey, I can't live like this and I need to make a change.
It took you 5 years to start processing the new trajectory that you found yourself on. What were you afraid of? What made you finally ready to face it?
When I was writing my chapter, I ended up getting sick. When I was in the hospital, I had a chat with God. If you do not have something better for me and I have to be dependent upon my children, take me now because this is horrible. I cannot keep living like this. And he showed me that, no, you can live and you can even prosper.
The United Nations observes June 23rd as International Widows' Day to draw attention to the voices and experiences of widows and to galvanize the unique support that they need. You've said that becoming a widow isn't just losing a person, it's losing an identity and the dream of what your future might look like. How does somebody start accepting that the future you've envisioned has changed? And how does one start becoming open to a different future? I imagine that is unbelievably difficult.
Definitely. It kind of comes at you sideways. We had all these dreams and now this dream is gone. I looked inward and said, what do I really want? Now it's just me. You kind of have to redream and go back to your childhood. Where did I want to go in life? And where am I going to go from here? You're not the same without your husband and you don't have the same dreams when you're not with them. So it totally changes.
Writing was where your healing started, you've said, and you began journaling every time a memory of your husband surfaced. When you sat down to write your chapter for the book, Unbreakable Spirit, what did that process reveal that you didn't expect?
I wasn't expecting to find that I needed to heal. It's been 5 years, so I'm okay. But that's when I was like, whoa, I am not good. I got to deal with this. You're scared that you're going to forget memories. To be able to go back and read through those when I was writing was very insightful.
You describe a moment of realization in your grief that your husband's death was his destiny to die young, not mine.
He always said he was going to die young. His father died at 57, his grandfather died at 57, and then he died at 46. And in the writing, I was like, hold on, I'm not living. I'm still trapped in my past, and I need to take that step forward to live again.
You've pushed back on the cultural message that grief is something to get over, especially when you hear widows apologizing, I should be doing better by now. What's the cost, in your opinion, of holding oneself to normal standards in a completely abnormal situation?
It's horrible. You feel so isolated and that no one understands where you're coming from. Unless you live it, you don't get it. You lose people in your life sometimes because they don't want to deal with your grief either. One of the first interviews I had after writing the chapter, I was crying throughout the interview and I just kept apologizing. I'm so sorry, I keep crying. And then finally I was just like, no, I am not apologizing. I'm crying because I love my husband. This is not a bad thing. I'm tired of apologizing to everyone around me for being who I am.
You've said that one of the best things you can do for your children as a grieving mother is to heal yourself. Your healing happened through three things: writing and being creative, regaining physical health, and faith.
I have manifested some of the traumas in my body. I have hyperthyroidism and then found out I had liver issues. I started exercising. I gave up sugar. I became healthy again. I was writing. It was key. And then as far as my spirit, when I lost my nephews when I was younger, I blamed God. Why did you take three beautiful children? And I was mad at him. And it took me almost 40 years to come back. When I would get in my grief, I would pick up the Bible. It was just kind of odd because it wasn't like me to do that, but I just kept being pushed. So I started reading the Bible, and every time I did, I would read about a widow in the Bible. And I was like, what? He addresses us specifically. And I just felt the warmth of his love. So I reconnected with God, and that really catapulted my life. That's when kind of everything clicked and said, okay, you're not healed, but you're ready to move forward in a better place.
You grew up being a people pleaser who kept the peace and put herself last, but widowhood changed that. How did you end up finally finding your voice, and what did you do with it once you had it?
My anger, I've channeled it into society. We are just as important as everyone else out there. Just because we don't have our husband doesn't make us insignificant. You lose a lot of your friends, couple friends, and things like that. And you're like, are you not my friend now? I just got mad and said, I'm making a place in this world for widows, and I'm going to make people see us whether they like it or not. And that was my voice coming out. Just needing to share my story and then hope I can inspire other widows to share their story and to come out of their corner and realize that they don't have to be shoved in that corner, that they can get out in life and live again.
I absolutely love that. I want to segue now into your work a little bit. You're a federally licensed enrolled agent, which means that you help taxpayers with IRS issues and can represent taxpayers from all 50 states. So obviously, you're extremely comfortable around tax and financial issues.
I use it as my way to get through. When I'd start to get sad, I would pick up a tax return and start working on it. If I didn't want to grieve, I could dive into my work. I handled the finances. I knew what to do when he passed, but I have other widow friends that, like one, I had to show her how to pay her water bill because she didn't even know how to pay a bill. There's so many women out there that depended on their husband for everything and they don't know what to do. So I realized my expertise in taxes and finances would help widows. There's so many pieces that go into your new life that you don't even consider until you're in the middle of it.
So, what are the financial hits a widow typically takes in the first weeks or months that nobody really warns her about?
They may not have money for rent the next month. Sometimes you're having to consider where you're going to live. And you're just sitting there wanting to deal with the fact that you just lost your husband. The last thing you want to think about is your bills, your house, your car. And quite frankly, you really don't care because in the scheme of things, it's so minute. But at the same time, you have to function in life and it can get worse if you don't handle things. That's why it's important, I feel, to bite off little pieces, figure out what's the most important, and then work from there one day at a time, one breath at a time.
Widows are actively targeted by scammers and taken advantage of by predators.
Oh my goodness, yes. Facebook is probably the worst place you can be as a widow, even though you can get community, but you are targeted. Every day I get a friend request from some doctor or whatever, and you can tell it's fake. They come at you. They assume you've got this life insurance policy, so you're sitting on all this money, and they know you're isolated. They prey on that. I've seen some other widows being taken advantage of. I've seen some pretty horrible things. If they're asking for money, they don't love you.
As a new widow, when you're barely able to breathe and the mail keeps bringing new statements, bills, and notices, what's the best way to approach that?
You just kind of have to take it one piece at a time. I would go through it, have your important, not important junk, and just separate it and go through it. You're going to get something from the IRS. Help yourself by actually attacking it, by going through it, even though it is such a daunting task. Just separate it the first day, organize it, and then just take it one breath and one step at a time until you open the important stuff and handle it.
On one of your TikToks, you shared decisions you feel a new widow absolutely shouldn't rush.
You've just got a lot of decisions to make. There is nothing that is so important that you have to sign a document today. There might be some time constraints. I'm not saying you don't have time constraints, but you don't necessarily have to do it the day that you realize it's there. Financial advisors, they mean well, but they can insert their foot so many times. I had one tell one of my widow friends that she needed to just remarry because she needed the income coming in or something. And she actually had money. It was the craziest thing I'd ever heard in my life. They make money on your money. So they're trying to get you to spend your money through them. You're focusing on the funeral the first week. That's all you need to think about is getting through that day, and don't let anybody pressure you into anything immediately.
There are specific documents someone who has lost a spouse needs immediately.
The biggest key to anything is the death certificate. You need multiple copies. That opens up bank accounts, life insurance, everything that you need. Then I would go from that to Social Security. And if you have children, there might be a little bit more there for you. There's a lot of things that you need to do with Social Security. So have a conversation with them to see what they can do to help you. The life insurance policy documents, you want to cash in on that. Sometimes there are time constraints on that. So you want to make that a priority for sure.
You also offer a widow's essential documents checklist. Where can people get that?
If you follow me on TikTok and a link, I've got it in my link tree.
You have a 3-step framework for financial recovery. Stabilize first, then protect what you have, then rebuild.
Stabilizing is basically just catching your breath. Get yourself in a good place to where you can sit down and look at what you need to do and prioritize, just kind of getting yourself together. Protect is to go to Social Security, do the things that you can do to protect your assets or to protect everything that you qualified for. Once you kind of get to your place of settlement, then you can start rebuilding, not live in such a horrible headspace.
Rebuilding is something that is a longer term process. We're talking definitely months, very likely years. A recent widow should not expect to somehow have reached that end process immediately.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Let's talk about a practical tax filing question, namely whether a widow should be filing jointly or single in the year her spouse dies. How does she decide one over the other, or are there timing issues that matter?
It's definitely a timing issue. The first year, you can still file married filing jointly because you usually have income from him as well. The only caveat is if you remarry before the end of the year, then you cannot file jointly. Then you're forced to file either with your new husband or however you choose to go down that route. Most women do not do that, but it's not unheard of. So you've got the first year of filing married filing jointly. And then if you have children, dependent children, you can do qualifying surviving spouse for 2 years. So you still get the benefit of being married for those. But if you don't have dependent children, then unfortunately that first year is the only year that you get to file jointly.
What happens if a widow discovers her spouse has been running a business and didn't pay taxes possibly for years? Apparently this happens more often than people think.
Yes, it's very shocking, but it happens. One thing to keep in mind is your husband's debt is not necessarily your debt. And it depends on how he filled out paperwork and how he set things up. So you really need to talk to someone, a professional, to know whether you need to pay it or whether you don't.
One of the most common mistakes people make when they owe the IRS money, you've said, is simply not filing their return because they can't pay. But you've said this is the worst possible move. What should they do instead?
Go ahead and file. You stop some of the penalties and interest from accruing. And so you end up saving money in the long run. Plus, you don't have them chasing after you for tax returns, which is a whole nother part of it. They'll come after you. They can garnish your wages. They're not a very nice entity to have to owe money to. And that's why people are scared and they don't want to file. But that not filing actually puts you on their radar more so. There's ways to make it okay if you can't pay it back. That's why you need to talk to a professional.
Companion animals are part of our family, and during difficult periods of time, they give us immeasurable comfort and support. And one of the questions you've received is whether someone can deduct their dog on their personal expenses.
No, you can't specifically claim them, but if your doctor does prescribe or you get a note from your doctor basically saying that you need a support animal, then you can deduct it as a medical expense. A few itemized deductions. They are our children, but not in the IRS's eyes.
I'd like to circle back to you in your journey. You've said that your own relationship with money changed fundamentally after your husband's death. You went from tying your worth to financial achievement to now defining abundance as living from trust instead of scarcity. I love that. What made that shift possible?
Well, definitely my faith. That was probably the biggest part of that shift. We put all these barriers on ourselves because of our beliefs about money. And unfortunately, we internalize that, and that's what we feel like we deserve in life. It's not so much about the money as it is about the trust that you're going to have what you need every day to make it through the day.
You've described the isolation of widowhood, how friends can care but don't truly understand what somebody is going through, and how a world keeps demanding things from you when you can barely function. What would you want people who have a friend who just experienced the loss of their partner to know, and how can they truly be there for them?
Just sit there and be with them. Don't try to give advice. That's the worst thing you can do. A lot of friends will walk away because they don't understand, and you remind them of something that they don't want to consider, which is the thought of losing their husband.
That just makes me both very sad and very angry to think about. Sometimes when people don't know how to react, they disengage and they simply won't be there anymore.
Oh, definitely. You're just trying to make it through one moment at a time, especially in those first few years. You just need a stable person next to you to listen. That's really all you need.
Just to be there, just to bear witness, however the grief manifests, and just allow that individual to know they are not alone, that they have somebody who is part of a larger circle who will be there with them.
That's exactly right. I have some that did that for me. You really stop and realize what's important and what's not important. Don't let anyone rush you. Do it at your pace. You're in control. You're still in control, even though you feel out of control because of your grief. You are in control. And just remember that.
Where can people find you online to learn more about your work?
TikTok is probably the most popular place to find me. Kathy.bass.tags.widow. And then I'm also on YouTube and Instagram. I would go to katherinebass.com. That's going to have all my coaching and my widow stuff over there. My tax business website is basstagservice.com.
Kathy, thank you so much for having taken the time today.
Thank you.